WARDOGS might be one of the most interesting FPS games I've played in a long time, and I'm saying this after spending hours, and I mean hours, playing the recent Alpha Playtest. Now, full disclosure, this was actually the first game playtest I've ever been involved in, so firstly I'd like to thank WARDOGS and Bulkhead for putting the invite out. So I didn't go into WARDOGS with a clipboard or 20 years of Q&A experience and a mission to find every single broken texture on the map. I went into it as a normal player. I wanted to shoot people, I wanted to blow stuff up. Most importantly, I wanted to find out whether WARDOGS was actually any good. And somehow I'd started playing, look at the clock and realise several hours had disappeared. So yeah, that's probably a good thing, but after playing it myself and looking through what other people who played the test were saying, there are definitely a few things WARDOGS absolutely nailed, and a few things that I think need a little bit more work before the game is ready. So let's talk about it. If you've somehow missed WARDOGS, the easiest way I can describe it is a large-scale military sandbox FPS where you've got infantry, vehicles, helicopters, base building, logistics and objectives all happening across one massive battlefield. But what makes WARDOGS interesting is that you're not forced to play the game in one specific way. You don't necessarily have to be the guy running headfirst towards the enemy with an assault rifle. You can do that, and trust me, I did plenty of that. But you can also transport players around the battlefield, you can build defense positions, you can help construct FOBs, you can operate vehicles, you can support your team, and all those different playstyles can actually make you in-game money. And that is where I think WARDOGS has stumbled across something really interesting. So I'm going to break down the pros and the cons to the playtest, not only my own opinions, but from what I've seen through Reddit, through the Discord, and other people's point of views on the game. One of my favourite things about WARDOGS was the cash system. Let's say I've been running infantry for a couple of rounds, and I've bought weapons, I've bought equipment, and I've died a few times because apparently standing still in the middle of a field isn't the tactical masterclass I thought it was. And now I'm skint. In most shooters, that is, you just keep doing the exact same thing, but in WARDOGS, I could basically say, right, infantry mark is finished for a bit. I could grab one of the transport vehicles, start moving players around the map, or go and help defense structures and gradually build my money back up. And once I've made enough cash, I'm back on the front line again with better equipment, better weapons, or you could just stay in the transport or help building defense. Obviously, the more money you get, the better equipment that you can, depending on what play style you choose. This creates a really nice gameplay loop where you're constantly changing what you're doing, and if you're still helping your team or you're just helping them in a different way. And from the community feedback I've seen, this was one of the things a lot of players really liked as well. Support roles don't feel completely pointless, and there's actually an incentive to do them. Another thing I really liked was the moving zone. Instead of the entire game turning into everyone sitting on the exact same objective for like 1 hour, you've got this moving zone around the battlefield which can give your team additional points, and I think that's actually quite a good idea, because in theory it forces the battlefield to evolve. One minute you're fighting in one area, then suddenly priority changes and everyone is starting to reposition, vehicles start moving, infantry starts rotating, helicopters start transporting players to different areas, new defense positions start appearing, and suddenly you've got a complete different battle happening somewhere else, and it keeps things very dynamic. And when it works properly, some of the battles that form around these objectives are brilliant. Moving on is the gunplay. This was obviously one of my biggest questions I had going in, because you can have the greatest economy system in gaming history, but if shooting somehow feels terrible, it's not going to matter. Thankfully, I actually really enjoyed the gunplay. Weapons felt satisfying, movement felt decent, and coming from Call of Duty, I never felt like WARDOGS was trying to turn itself into Call of Duty with people side cancelling through every doorway at 90 miles per hour. It didn't feel so hardcore that moving your character felt like operating industrial machinery. You could say the movement and the gunplay were like as if PUBG and Battlefield had a baby. And that's a decent middle ground there. And I think with his additional polishing, the gunplay could become one of the game's strongest features. But there was one thing I did notice, but we'll come back to that later. Moving on, probably one of the biggest surprises for me was the server performance. You're talking around 100 players, infantry everywhere, vehicles, helicopters, structures being built, explosions, people firing rockets across the map, and personally, I had basically no major server stability issues. And remember, this isn't a finished game, this is an alpha. So going into a 100-player alpha playtest, I was expecting some absolute carnage, servers exploding, people teleporting around, my character getting launched into another dimension. But my experience was genuinely really stable, and that's something I've also seen other players praise. There have obviously been people reporting performance issues and stutters. You're never going to get identical performances across every PC, because everyone's PC is different. Different specs or different builds, but overall the technical foundation seemed surprisingly solid considering how early the game still is, and that is massively encouraging. Another pro I could give, and I think this actually might be the biggest compliment I can give the game, WARDOGS creates moments. You're not just spawning, getting 3 kills, dying and repeating. You might start as infantry, then suddenly you're helping defend an FOB. 5 minutes later, you're in a vehicle transporting players, then a helicopter appears, then somebody starts screaming over proximity chat, then a tank rolls over a hill, then half your team gets obliterated. 20 minutes later, you're thinking, how the hell did I even get here? Those are the kinds of multiplayer games I love. Games where things happen naturally. And judging by the community's reaction, that's where WARDOGS really shines. When you've got players actually communicating and actually using all the systems together, the game becomes something completely different.
Surrendered. To the
Hey, if we don't win, I'm gonna beat the fuck out of each one of you, okay?
Shut up.
You understand?
I doubt that. You're not gonna do nothing.
You fucking understand me?
Who's building fob? Anybody building fob?
Sound like you're 95 pounds
Return my
away.
ball. Return my ball.
Well, I'm soaking wet right now. You wanna touch me?
Return the map.
Sounds like a party.
I hear if we all pile together, it makes the guy closest to the table real warm.
However, it's not perfect. And there was some problems, and I feel like that brings me on to talk about the snipers. Because, good lord, at certain points, it felt like I hadn't loaded into WARDOGS. I'd load into bloody Sniper Elite or something like that. If you weren't sniping, you weren't winning. And that's how I felt, and that's what it felt like for me. The map had some huge sightlines. There are elevated positions, there's towers, there's long open areas, and naturally players worked out very quickly that sitting somewhere with a sniper rifle could be extremely profitable. Profitable. And this wasn't just something I noticed. The amount of snipers was one of the most common complaints from other players as well. Now, I don't think the solution is necessarily just destroying the sniper rifles, because sniping should be powerful in a game like this. The bigger question is whether the map, the economy, the objective rewards currently encouraging sniping a little bit too much. If I'm getting significantly rewarded sitting hundreds of meters away in a farm, why would I risk pushing the objective? And that's something I think the developers need to keep an eye on, because WARDOGS is at its best when the teams are moving around and interacting with each other, not when 60 people have decided they're Chris Ryan. I don't even know if he's a sniper. Another complaint I've seen from players is the map is big. Now, we only were able to play one map. I believe there's another 2 coming out. Full release, maybe. But that's part of the appeal. Massive maps. But depending on where the objectives are and where teams decide to position themselves, you can sometimes end up with huge areas where absolutely nothing is happening. Meanwhile, everyone else is piled into one section of the map. especially around certain towers or objectives. For me, the moving zone helps with this, but I think the developers are going to have to keep working on ways to encourage players to spread out and use more of the battlefield. Because when you've got 100 players on a server, it should feel like there's 100 players on a server. Now here's something I personally noticed when transitioning from hipfire to ADS. It felt like the centre point wasn't always lining up properly. I'd have my hipfire crosshair pointed at somewhere, then I aimed down sights and I felt like my aim would actually just move like slightly towards the top left. Now, whether that's an animation issue, crosshair adjustment, weapon position or something else, I couldn't tell you. But it definitely felt noticeable. And in a shooter, consistency between hipfire and ADS is incredibly important because you want your aim to feel predictable. So that's one thing I definitely like to see tighten up. Again, it's an alpha. That's exactly what playtests are for. Moving on. As a controller player, please, let me use my controller. During the playtest, I wasn't able to use my controller the way I wanted to, and while obviously WARDOGS is being developed primarily around PC right now, native PlayStation or Xbox controller input would be a massive quality of life improvement, especially because plenty of PC players still prefer using controller. Now, I did see people on the Discord saying they were able to use their controller. God knows how. I could not figure it out. And if they did use their controller, then obviously it didn't feel natural. So if we could add that in, absolutely brilliant. Now, when I'm surfing through Reddit or the Discord or Twitter, there's a few criticisms from the wider community that I think are worth mentioning. One was the progression speed. Players were unlocking some pretty serious equipment extremely quickly during, whoa, that's a tongue tie, during the test. Now personally I wouldn't panic about that yet. This was a playtest. There was every chance progression was deliberately accelerated because the developers actually wanted people testing the higher level equipment. But long term is something I would imagine they'll obviously need to balance. You don't want experienced players running around completely geared while someone buying the game a few weeks later is shooting them with what feels like an Nerf gun. Armour also created some interesting discussions. Some players felt heavily armoured enemies could absorb a little too much damage, while others thought the time to kill was absolutely fine. Again, that's something, the sort of balance issue I'd expect from an alpha. There were similar discussions about tanks and mortars being extremely powerful, but honestly, I'd rather the developers have systems that are fun, but slightly overpowered right now, than systems nobody wants to use. Balance can be changed. Boring is much harder to fix. But what surprised me the most, the thing that surprised me more than anything was how finished WARDOGS sometimes felt. Not graphically perfect, not perfectly balanced, not bug-free, I'm not saying that. But the core game loop is already there, and that's the important part. Because you can improve animations, you can improve rebalancing weapons, you can adjust economy numbers, you can change objective rewards, you can fix controller support, and you can tweak crosshairs, but if the fundamental game isn't enjoyable, you've got a much bigger problem, and WARDOGS is enjoyable. I know that because every time I played it, time disappeared. And I'd jump on thinking I could just play for a little while, then suddenly I'm looking at the clock wondering why I've lost half of my day. And that doesn't happen because a game has nice graphics. That happens because the gameplay loop has got its hooks into you. Touching on the graphics, absolutely immense. So after my first experience taking part in the game's playtest, what did I think of WARDOGS? Phenomenal. Genuinely. And maybe that's surprising considering we've just spent the last few minutes talking about things that needed fixing, but remember what stage is this game at? It is an alpha. We're supposed to find problems, we're supposed to discover broken strategies, we're supposed to work out that half the server wants to sit on a hill with sniper rifles. That is literally the point. But the important question isn't, is WARDOGS perfect right now? Obviously it isn't. The question is there a really good game underneath all of this. And based on what I've played, 100%, the gunplay is good. The economy is genuinely interesting, having multiple ways contributing, your team is brilliant, and moving objectives helps create dynamic battles, server stability was incredibly impressive for the scale of the game, and most importantly, WARDOGS gave me that feel I wanted to jump straight back and fix some of the sniper dominance, tighten up the aiming, keep working on the map flow and economy, give us native DualSense support, please. And I genuinely think WARDOGS could turn into something special, and considering we're talking about an alpha, that's a pretty exciting place for the game to be. So I want to hear from everybody else who managed to play the playtest. If you see this, what did you see? What do you think? What was the best thing about WARDOGS? And what was one of the things the developers absolutely need to change before the release? Drop it in the comments because I'm genuinely curious to see whether everyone had the same experience as I did. And if you didn't get into the playtest, subscribe because I'll be covering plenty more WARDOGS as we learn more about the game, and hopefully the next time those servers are open I will see you on the battlefield. Preferably without a sniper rifle pointing directly at my forehead, thank you very much. So yeah.